This week on Vaticano, Pope Francis invites Europe to rediscover Jesus at the opening of the General Jubilee session of the Council of the Bishops' Conferences of Europe. Meet Cardinal Kurt Koch to learn about Eucharistic communion and ecumenism, and stay with us to visit St. Padre Pio's hometown of Pietrelcina. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. Pope Francis opened the plenary session of the Council of Bishops' Conferences of Europe, or CCEE, that this year is celebrating its 50th anniversary.
Riflettere, ricostruire, vedere.
In his homily, the Holy Father thanked the Council for its work and invited the bishops to confront secularization by introducing people to the joy of an encounter with Jesus.
Siamo chiamati dal Signore.
The Lord is calling us to a splendid work, the work of making His house ever more welcoming, so that everyone can enter and dwell there.
Pope Francis encouraged Europe to rediscover the ever-youthful face of Jesus and His bride, the Church, in order to be rejuvenated in the faith. 39 bishops from Europe gathered in Rome with the successor of Peter for the council. For the occasion of the CCEE's Golden Jubilee, Catholic news agency Vatican analyst Andrea Gagliarducci published a book called Christ is the Hope for Europe, a copy of which he shared with the Holy Father during the papal flight to Hungary.
So the title is taken from the Apostolic Post-Synod Exhortation Ecclesia in Europa by John Paul II, that at one point stated, Christ is the hope for Europe. Christ is the hope because around Christ, around this Christianity, a new civilization was born. The European civilization, states were born around that, cultures were born around that. If we forget this, we're going into the worst part of the so-called cancel culture that now is so much fashioned, when everybody that happened before, and especially Christianity and especially religions, are to be neglected in this moment. But if we neglect what we were, if we neglect our roots, then we are no one. Then there is nothing, and there is not human being anymore. And that's why Christ is still hope for Europe, because if you get back to your roots, you can build something new.
Gagliarducci considers the Council prophetic because since its beginnings, the bishops have worked to unify Europe, not only in the framework of the European Union, but Europe as a whole, from Portugal to Russia.
During this time we had 3 ecumenical assemblies which gathered all together Christians from all over Europe. We had several meetings that helped the bishops to gather together, and then the Iron Curtain fell, and this was also part of a result of the work of the bishops.
Gagliarducci underscores that the Council was born out of the bishops' desire to stay in touch and network, but not as a directive of the Holy See. This is an example of synodality that was widely encouraged by popes since its foundation.
Well, for the Church now is sort of the time of synodality, you know, so everybody speaks about listening to each other. This is something the bishops already did, and they did that since the 70s. If you look back at the past of this organization, they started discussing about Muslim immigration since the 70s, when nobody was talking about that. They started discussing about dialogue with Buddhists back in the 80s, when nobody was talking about that. They pushed for the ecumenical dialogue when ecumenical dialogue just seemed a dream. So it's about time that we look back to the past. We look back to what the Church has already done.
Europe has always been the heart of the Catholic Church, and the future of Europe and the Church are interdependent. The future of Christianity in Europe is something that concerns the Holy Father, as he expressed in the preface of the book, The True Europe, Identity and Mission. Pope Francis wrote the preface for a collection of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI's texts written before and during his pontificate. Catholic news agency reports that the Holy Father's preface shows support for Benedict XVI's message, calling Europe to rediscover its true identity as a region guided by the principles of Christianity.
Today in Europe, the very idea of respect for every human life is increasingly lost, starting with a loss of awareness of its sacredness, that is, precisely starting from the obfuscation of the consciousness that we are creatures of God.
The Holy Father's words lead well into Benedict XVI's urging Europe to recognize God's role as the creator. By acknowledging this, man can see himself as being made in God's image and being God's gift. Pope Francis praised Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI on his courage to read the present situation in Europe and encourage a revival of Christian principles. After the break, we'll learn about Eucharistic communion and ecumenism. Stay with us. Europe has often been seen as the center of a religious dialogue, with a majority of people belonging to three main religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. For 61 years, the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity has been fostering interreligious conversation, and its president, Cardinal Kurt Koch, sees ecumenism as the beacon, lighting the way to unity in Europe.
In history, we've had many divisions in Europe. Europe is actually the continent where many divisions have happened. But Europe will only have a future if it rediscovers Christian unity, and for this, it needs reconciliation, like Pope John Paul II particularly emphasized, that Europe must breathe with two lungs, a Western Latin lung and an Eastern Greek lung. And this reconciliation must take place so that unity can also be found in Europe.
For Europe to breathe with these two lungs, Cardinal Koch points to baptism and the mutual understanding of the sacrament as the foundation for ecumenism.
Ökumene ist immer eine baptismale.
Ecumenism is always a baptismal ecumenism, but as the Second Vatican Council says, this original unity in baptism strives to arrive at full communion in the Eucharist. That is the road to communion already exists in baptism, to find communion again in the Eucharist, and I think the Eucharistic Congress also reminds us of this journey, that the goal of the ecumenical efforts will be the rediscovery of Eucharistic communion.
Understanding these ties leads to further steps in reaching Christian unity, but it's very important to understand exactly what this unity is.
Unterscheiden zwischen eucharistischer Gastfreundschaft und Interkommunion.
First of all, a distinction must be made between Eucharistic hospitality and intercommunion, which are not the same thing. And Eucharistic hospitality means that individual believers in their personal faith decision reach the conclusion that they can participate in communion, in the Eucharist of the Catholic Church, or only one of the Protestant Church, while intercommunion means that one has communion in different churches and ecclesial communities. But the word intercommunion already reveals the whole problem. That is, your intercommunion shows only that it is not yet the communion, and that these must be found. Then, there is only a difference between those churches, as canon law says, that have valid sacraments. There, participation is possible, in contrast to those ecclesial communities in which sacraments are not recognized in the same way. Thus, with the Orthodox and Eastern churches, the question of Eucharistic communion is a lot easier than with the churches that emerged from the Reformation.
However, Cardinal Koch explains that there are some exceptions, and it's possible to administer the Eucharist to people in these Protestant churches.
Ausnahmen vor in ganz dringenden Fällen.
Canon law includes some exceptions in very urgent cases. When someone has the conviction
that he can participate in the Eucharistic celebration of the Catholic Church for his own personal salvation concerns, but he must, this in the prerequisite, share the faith of the Church and must be well disposed. The situation is different when a Catholic believer participates in Protestant Eucharist. Here, the problem is the participation in the Protestant Eucharist naturally presupposes recognition of the ministry as well, which is why this question is still the real crux of ecumenical efforts.
The issue of Eucharistic communion is essential in the development of interreligious dialogue and Christian unity, since the Eucharist is central to Catholicism.
Für die katholische Kirche ist
For the Catholic Church, the Eucharist is the earth of the whole faith and the entire church community. The Second Vatican Council affirms that it is the fount from which the life of the Church emerges, and it is the culmination towards which Church life moves. That is, I think, it's critically important for Eucharistic Congress to again make the immense depth and beauty of the Eucharistic mystery visible, also in the Catholic Church. Only then can we also bring this marvelous bill into ecumenical relations.
After the break, we head to Pietrelcina to witness the installation of a new statue of Padre Pio and learn about his ties with the USA.
In the rolling hills around Pietrelcina in the south of Italy, a new statue to Padre Pio is being installed. It's close to the guardian father of the Padre Pio monastery. The statue is carefully lifted into place by a crane, ready to take up its new home, overlooking the hills and beautiful countryside. This is a special statue of Padre Pio, dedicated to the people of the United States as a way to acknowledge the generous financial support they gave to Padre Pio's father, Grazio Forgione, enabling him to pay for his son's education and time in seminary. Luciano Lamonarca is the president and CEO of the St. Pio Foundation.
Was made as a sign of recognition and gratitude to the people of the United States of America for giving the possibility to Grazio Forgione, Padre Pio's father, to work in America so that he could work honestly, make money, and send Padre Pio back to become a priest. Without the efforts and sacrifice of this father, which might represent the 3.2 million of immigrants that went in the United States of America, probably we would not have had a Padre Pio.
But before the unveiling took place, just a short distance from where this statue will stand, the day began with a unique guided tour of the hometown and birthplace of Padre Pio, Pietrelcina. Lost among the mountains, in this picturesque town with its small streets and beautiful buildings, you'll find, down a narrow lane, a small stone building that was where Padre Pio was born and grew up. A small group is given a special tour to celebrate the installation of the new statue today, and they get to enter the home, including the bedroom where it is believed Francesco Forgione was born in 1887 to a poor but deeply religious family.
We have to think that we are in the place where he played with his friends, where he had his first meet with God, with Jesus Christ. There is an air of peace and tranquility. So generally, they are in a moment of ecstasy. They just walk and they can breathe the air of peace.
From humble beginnings as a peasant, Francesco Forgione would go on to become Padre Pio, one of the most famous and important saints of the 20th century. On top of the hill, there is a church dedicated to the saint with an incredible view.
Goosebumps, I think, is the first thing that got me. You feel very spiritual. Having a guy that tells you all the story and goes deep in all the details, you can picture his life. I think it brings you back really to see how simple was San Pio, Padre Pio, and how powerful was at the same time.
Back at the site of the new statue, a small crowd of locals, visitors and dignitaries have gathered.
Per Pietrelcina, per I nostri giovani, per il futuro.
The new statue of Padre Pio was designed and created by Canadian artist and sculptor Timothy Schmaltz, who gave the piece the title, I Embrace You. And with that, the veil is pulled back, revealing the beautiful life-size statue. The statue depicts Padre Pio kneeling at the bottom of the cross, embracing the world, with a special emphasis on the United States.
Nel nome del Padre, del Figlio e dello Spirito Santo. Amen.
You will see Jesus on the sky, and through his stigmata, and the blood flows, passes through Padre Pio's hands, surrounding the words, the map of the United States of America, in sign of protection. I am proud, I am privileged, but I am humble. Imagine what would be for this town to become a beacon of light through this work, and hopefully many other dioceses and cities in the United States of America will replicate this statue.
A smaller replica of the statue was blessed by Pope Francis at the Vatican that very morning. After much planning and preparation, this new work of art will stand here for years to come as a reminder of how one man from humble, simple beginnings went on to have a remarkable impact on the faithful across the world.